It's very painful. You know, she's not in my life anymore. All she is my memories.
This time of year, it's like somebody rips a bandage off me, and the wound is just ever so more painful.
30 years, a day doesn't go by that I don't think about my niece. I think about her every day. What could have been? And she needs justice for what happened to her.
Sometimes we think we're untouchable, that bad things happen to other people and not us. But the world is a complicated place, and even a simple walk through your neighborhood can turn into a nightmare that you may never awaken from. This is where this tragic story begins. March 29th, 1995, Somerville, Massachusetts. It's 11 p.m. in the neighborhood of Winter Hill. Tommy LeBlanc has just walked his girlfriend Deanna Cremin to the corner of Heath and Bond Streets before heading back home. From the corner where Deanna was left to a senior housing complex is about 500 feet. This is where Deanna's body would be found the next morning after she was sexually assaulted and manually strangulated. From that same corner to Deanna's home is exactly 1,584 feet. That's 0.3 of a mile. The temperature that night was a cold 41 degrees with wind gusts up to 25 miles per hour. So we can assume that Deanna was walking at a brisk pace. Some have estimated that the walk would have taken her no more than 5 minutes to reach the safety of her home. Somewhere along this short walk, a psychopath was waiting and watching for the perfect opportunity to take Deanna's life. Was she being stalked? Was this just a random act of violence? And were we ever given the full story of the events surrounding the last moments of her life? To further complicate matters, we have no witnesses and police aren't even sure if Deanna's life was taken, where her body was found. With just these few facts available, I have put together 3 possible scenarios that might explain what happened that tragic night 31 years ago. Please bear in mind that these are only my own personal thoughts and not related to any facts that were ever released by members of law enforcement. In our first scenario, we can assume that Deanna is cold. Her hands are probably stuffed into her pockets, and her head is slightly bent as she braces herself to walk the last stretch home. Like any of us, she was most likely distracted with thoughts of going home and warming up. She's not paying attention to any of the dangers that were lurking in the shadows. Deanna walked this path hundreds of times without any problems. This was her neighborhood, and naively, she took some comfort in that. Let's say a car pulls up, and the killer offers to drive her the rest of the way home. Deanna recognizes the driver and gets in because she believes he's harmless, and she's tired and cold. At this point, the killer only drives a short distance to a darker part of the street, so it's harder for anyone to see what he's about to do. He pulls over, turns off the car, and before Deanna can react, the killer is on top of her. They struggle as he sexually assaults her and then strangles her in a fit of rage. The killer drives over to the senior complex, where he knows there's a walking path and he can leave the body without anyone discovering her until the next day. Deanna is very petite, so she was easy to carry. He dumps her along the path and disappears into the darkness of night. In scenario number 2, the killer may have been stalking Deanna. He was obsessed with her and knew her routine. Deanna had a 10 p.m. curfew, only this night she was an hour late in going home. Maybe this is what set him off. He fantasized about her, and he's jealous that she spent an extra hour at Tommy's house. As Deanna reaches Jack Street, the killer silently comes up behind her and puts her in a chokehold. He places a hand across her mouth and tells her to do exactly as he says, and she won't get hurt. They walk a short distance to the path behind the senior complex, where he throws her to the ground and sexually assaults her and then strangles her to death before making a quick escape. In our last scenario, what if Tommy LeBlanc didn't tell police the entire story? What if something far more sinister happened that night? What if Tommy knows more than he has ever told anyone? What if everything about this case isn't quite as it seems? This is the actual time it took us to walk that same distance to safety that Deanna would have walked. It's hard to comprehend how quickly a life can be taken. Whatever scenario that you believe or don't believe, the reality is that it took only mere minutes for this psychopath to choose to brutally assault a 17-year-old girl, then place his hands around her throat and squeeze the life right out of her. So who would do such a thing and why? How did a killer walk free for 31 years? Was something missed in the investigation, or was the answer as plain as the nose on your face? To start, we'll go back to that horrible night to see how Deanna ended up walking home alone in the dark. Then we'll expand our investigation into the crime scene, autopsy discoveries, and end with a full scope of persons of interest. We know from prior statements by Deanna's mother, Catherine, that Deanna was still alive at 10 p.m. because that is when she called to say that she would be an hour late coming home. There was nothing in Deanna's voice at that time to alarm her mother. Catherine then falls asleep as she is waiting for her daughter to return for the evening. Just before 11 p.m., Tommy and Deanna leave his house at 419 Broadway and set out for her house located at 48 Jack Street. Tommy told police that he only walked Deanna to the corner of Heath and Bond because he ordered some food and wanted to get back to receive the delivery. This was the last time Tommy claimed to have seen Deanna alive. At 12 a.m., Catherine awakens and discovers that Deanna is still not home. She calls the pager that she had just given Deanna for her 17th birthday, just 4 days prior to the murder, but there is no response. Catherine thinks that Deanna has probably just fallen asleep watching TV at Tommy's house and decides to go to bed and scold Deanna in the morning for being late. It's now the early morning of March 30th, and Catherine finds that Deanna never came home. Angrily, she phones Tommy and tells him to tell Deanna to get home immediately. Tommy explains that he walked Deanna halfway home the night before and hasn't seen her since. Catherine is now deeply concerned, but has to get to work. She tells Deanna's stepfather, Michael, to call the high school to see if she has arrived, and if not, to please call authorities. The time is now 8 a.m., and 2 elementary school-age children that Deanna has babysat for on several occasions are taking a shortcut to school by following along the walking path behind the James J. Corbett apartments at 125 Jack Street. The 2 children see a female lying next to a fence just off the path. They continue on to school and tell their teacher of their discovery. The children say that the person looked to be sleeping on the ground. The school notified authorities and officers were immediately dispatched to the scene. The news of a body being found spread like wildfire throughout the town. Catherine's husband phoned her at work a short time later, telling her that she needed to come home. At that point, even without confirmation, Catherine knew that the body found was Deanna. We'll now move on to the crime scene and cause of death. Deanna was lying on her back next to a chain link fence at the top of an embankment that separated the Corbett apartments from a housing development on Mystic Ave. To get to that location, you would pass another fence and several apartment windows as you made your way down a flight of 13 steps. No one living in the surrounding area remembered hearing anything unusual the night before. The killer made no effort to conceal Deanna's body. He either didn't have the time or simply didn't care. She was partially nude. The red jacket that she had been wearing was open in the front. Her pants were pulled completely off her right leg and halfway down her left thigh. Her right sneaker was not on her foot, but the left sneaker and sock were still on. Police would not say if any of Deanna's clothes were missing or if the killer had kept any souvenirs. There was a fierce struggle between Deanna and her killer. In fact, it was so fierce that one of Deanna's hips had been broken during the sexual assault and strangulation. Biological evidence was collected from under her fingernails and other parts of her body. We could find no estimated time of death from the coroner's office. The sheer brutality of this attack was going to stoke every emotion of those living in Somerville. Investigators knew that they would have to be careful about any evidence leaking out to the press. The last thing they needed to deal with was vigilante justice for Deanna. Officers began working quietly behind the scenes, interviewing hundreds of people and letting them tell this victim's story. A list of persons of interest began to quickly form. Some names were familiar, and some were an interesting long shot. Perhaps the most hopeful development came in the form of a man seen near the scene on the night of the murder. An artist was able to create this composite sketch. The man was described as a white male, 40 to 45, short dark hair, 5'9" to 5'11" tall, weighing 160 to 170 pounds. Police were quick to note that the man was not a suspect. They were only seeking to speak with him about what he may have seen or heard on the evening of March 29th. The list of persons of interest was interesting and very revealing as to what was going on in Deanna's life just before her murder. An in-depth look into Tommy LeBlanc is where the police would start first. Tommy moved to Somerville to live with his mother around the latter part of 1992 or beginning of 1993. He was quiet and introverted. His mother said that he started having some anger management issues as early as 5 years of age. In 1994, Tommy began dating Deanna. There were some notable differences in their personalities. She was chatty and had a lot of friends, and he was more withdrawn with fewer friends. Depending on who you talk to, the description of Tommy and Deanna's relationship would vary. Some describe the couple as close and loving, while others claim that Tommy was controlling and abusive. There were whispers that Deanna was planning to end their relationship. Whatever the real story was concerning the young couple, we will probably never know. But one thing for certain is the fact that their nightly routine suddenly changed the night of the murder. Deanna spent many evenings at the LeBlanc home, and every night before curfew, Tommy walked Deanna home, then called her one last time when he got back to his house. Tommy's story has always been that he walked her to the corner of Heath and Bond because he was getting a food delivery. Tommy even had the receipt for the food. To further bolster his activities on that evening, he presented his friend Jason as his alibi. Jason claimed to have been with Tommy when the food was delivered, but Catherine had her doubts. She stated that if the story Tommy told was true, then why didn't he complete his normal routine with a final call to Deanna when she would have returned home that evening? If he had, maybe things would have turned out differently for Deanna. To further complicate matters, the troubles from the LeBlanc home were beginning to make headlines not long after the murder. Tommy's mother stated that he became extremely emotional after the loss of Deanna and began to act out in violent ways. In total, Susan LeBlanc went to court 3 times seeking restraining orders against her son. In an affidavit, Susan wrote, "When Tommy goes into a rage, I fear that my life is in jeopardy. He has thrown lamps and furniture in an effort to maintain control of me. Many occasions, I feel that my house is not a home, but more of a prison. He has a history of a violent temper, and lately, if he doesn't get his way, he will react irrationally. I also wish to state that my son Tommy is truly on a collision course with himself. A district court judge ordered Tommy to move out of his mother's home and stay at least 100 yards away from her." Things were not looking good for Tommy. As prosecutors moved forward with what evidence they had in Deanna's case, Tommy and his friend Jason would go on to plead the fifth, and a grand jury refused to hand down an indictment. Skipping forward to 2019, new evidence pointed to the mayor's office and the city administrator's office, suggesting that they may have concealed evidence pertaining to the case in 1995. Tommy and his alibi witness, Jason, were counseled by Jason's father, an attorney known to do legal work for various high-ranking members of the city. Interestingly enough, Tommy and Jason's friendship dissolved shortly after Deanna's murder. Moving on to the next person of interest, we have Charlie Houghton, a 36-year-old fireman at the time of the murder. He was the son of a very prominent local family, and his father was a well-known attorney. Charlie was assigned to the station on Broadway, across from the market where Deanna worked part-time. It was learned through many interviews with Deanna's friends and co-workers that a relationship of sorts had developed between her and Charlie. According to witness statements, Charlie would come into the store and the two of them would flirt with one another. He was even helping her prepare for her driver's exam. It was reported that Deanna's younger brother said that he had seen Charlie kissing Deanna in his car. Records show that Charlie worked the morning of the murder, but called off sick twice when he was scheduled to work just 4 days later. Police questioned him the day after Deanna's body was found and twice after that. Each time Charlie was interviewed, he was cooperative and willingly provided a DNA sample. With no further details given, the investigation into Charlie ended. However, police have stated that no one has been removed from their list. Next up, we have a person that police never formally named. The man was a local and was incarcerated for rape and serving his sentence in Massachusetts Correctional Institution in Cedar Junction. The man denied killing Deanna, but liked to play a game of cat and mouse with investigators. There was never any hesitation on his part, as he went into detail describing what he would have done to Deanna if, in fact, he was the perpetrator of her sexual assault and murder. Lastly, we have Deanna's stepfather. There was some tension in the Cremin household that included claims that when Michael was drinking or using drugs, he could be violent at times. During our research, we found reports stating that Catherine and Deanna were stashing money away and hiding child support money. There were no further details given about the matter or what the mother and daughter had planned to do with the money. We can confirm that in less than a year after Deanna was murdered, Catherine's marriage to Michael ended. Beyond the short list of persons of interest that have been featured here, We feel that we would be remiss if we didn't include other factors that may have played a role in what happened to Deanna. For instance, Captain Robert Bradley, who served as chief of detectives until 1997, once stated that 90% of all homicides are committed by an individual known to the victim. He said that it's rare if it's a stranger. If we follow that train of thought, the possibilities in this case become much broader in terms of who we're looking for. Deanna worked part-time at a market, volunteered at the Somerville Cable Access Television Network, and babysat for several families in her community. There would have been customers, co-workers, and neighbors that she interacted with on a daily basis, without ever realizing that she may have become the focus of a very dangerous man. Perhaps another important detail that we might want to take into consideration is the neighborhood that Deanna was walking through. Look at all the homes Deanna and Tommy would have passed on their nightly walks back to Deanna's house. All it takes is a solid routine and a pretty girl to capture the sick mind of a killer. This is all we know thus far about Deanna's murder. Tommy LeBlanc continues to remain silent about that horrible night, as is his right to do so. Exercising your Fifth Amendment right is in no way an admission of guilt. Let's take a moment to remember this precious life taken on March 29, 1995. 17-year-old Deanna Cremin was full of potential. She was bright, funny, well-liked, and loved children. She dreamed of becoming a preschool teacher. Now all that remains are some dedications made in her honor. Trees, benches, a playground, and a town square bear the name of a girl whose life was senselessly taken. Prayer services and walks are held in her memory on each anniversary of her murder. Authorities continue to review Deanna's case and hope one day soon that advancements in DNA technology and genetic genealogy will one day catch this killer. Catherine once told a reporter, "In the morning, if I wake up and she isn't the first thing on my mind, I feel the guilt. This isn't about closure. I will never get over it. This is about justice. My daughter's killer is out there, somewhere." If you have any information about the murder of Deanna Cremin, please reach out to the Somerville Police Department at 617-625-1600. Are you obsessed with true crime content? Subscribe now and join our growing community as we analyze and discuss the details of some truly baffling cold cases. Browse our growing library of cold case investigations and immerse yourself in the mysteries that keep us up at night. Subscribe and join the EOJ community today. All it takes is a click.